Rec-
All right, everyone, we'll get started now. We have everyone. Hello, welcome to another round of tasting with the Chicago Wine Company. My name is Silas Morgan. Many of you are repeats, so you probably know my face well by now. Probably better than I know yours, because only a few of us actually met in person. So next time you're in the shop, make sure you introduce yourself, and you're gonna sound really familiar, but yeah, make sure you mention that you've been on the tastings, please. Yeah, once again, thank you for joining us. This is an amazing opportunity to, even for us to taste wines that, you don't drink every day. Well, some of us might, but for us mere plebeians, I know I'm not drinking Sauv Blanc every day, so it's a real treat to, try different wines like this, and also try them next to each other. It's really nice to have the compare and contrast, and then I know I gain a lot from my coworkers and their insights and their explanations of the wine. It does take a good bit of research behind each wine to kind of bring a little bit more nuance to the conversation. So with that, I do want to mention, please utilize the chat function. We'll be using that just to answer any questions as we go through the tasting. Everyone can see that, I believe, but the panelists, whoever's not talking, will kind of monitor that and make sure that whoever's talking answers your questions. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to my coworker Gerard to get us started.
And like Silas said, thanks everybody for joining. I know we are fortunate to have a lot of repeats and obviously some new faces and some new people, but the repeats, just really thank you all for joining, and this has been a lot of fun as we kind of tour our way through the world and try to find a lot of different themes and cool stuff. This is definitely one we've been looking forward to. It's very exciting, and needless to say, I mean, these two Chardonnays are world-class Chardonnays that are a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can slice Chardonnay because it's one of those grapes that's fairly ubiquitous and you can literally grow it anywhere. At its best, the two expressions that we have today are again world-class expressions. One from Burgundy and one from the heart of Sonoma by a producer who is Grand Cru, who is Burgundy caliber, to say the least, and Marc Aubert. So that said, I think we will start with the Henri Boillot Premier Cru Genevière. And so we'll kind of talk about each producer a little bit, and obviously about what makes the site itself so unique, the specific site. And in the case of Boillot, over the course of the last 10 or 15 years, Domaine Henri Boillot has elevated itself to one of the premier white wine houses in Burgundy. They do make a little bit of red Burgundies. They do make a little bit of Pinot Noir. But the whites are certainly what they're known for. And the domain itself dates back to 1885, when Henri Boillot's grandfather founded the domain. And at that time, or for the longest time, it was referred to as Domaine Jean Boillot. In 1996 is when Henri kind of branched off on his own to start his own négociant business. And just to kind of give some delineation to what négociant compared to domain means, I mean, for those who are very, very well versed in Burgundy, so domain is when the wines are everything is kind of controlled by the estate. Négociant is when the wines are the grapes are purchased, and then there's varying levels of involvement there. So when Henri Boillot started off on his own, it was actually a négociant wing where he was purchasing grapes and then vinifying and producing great wines. But ultimately, it did lead him back to his family's domain, which in 2005 he kind of came home, so to speak, purchased his family's domain, bought out his brother and sister's share, and renamed what was originally Domaine Jean Boillot, renamed it to what it's now known today as Domaine Henri Boillot. And again, just some of the most stunning white wines in Burgundy, both qualitatively. I think we'll come to find that just in just a couple of seconds here. But critics and the press have raved about these wines for quite a bit. And from the basic village level to the premier cru level to the few Grand Crus that he works with, just really, really impressive wines for the money and great expressions of Burgundy. Organically grown grapes, low yields, minimal use of new oak, I think is what really makes these wines shine. And the Meursault Genévrier is one of his top wines. And if I could get on here, let's see. Silas, do we have the screen share enabled? We do. Go. All right, there we go. So Burgundy, and do we see that map there, Silas? Are we good? Okay. So the power of the internet, and Burgundy does us no favors in that it's a very complicated, region to begin with, and even for these kinds of resources and tools, it's not as easy. It's kind of either super broad or super into the nitty gritty. And I tried to at least give some context as to where we're going to be here. And we are in the Côte de Beaune, and your wet red wine, your Pinot Noir producers are up this way, but Meursault is going to be in the southern portion of the Côte de Beaune, right here. So it's going to be very close to Saint-Aubin and Coligny-Montrachet and Chassagne-Montrachet. And the three main premier crus that Meursault is so well known for are these three right here. So they're basically contiguous vineyards. Genévrier, Perrier, and Charme, they are considered the triumvirate of Meursault. And Meursault in general it's funny. It's only from north to south. It's only three miles, which by Burgundy standards, it's quite a large village. But as we know, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, it's 3 miles, kind of pretty tiny, So these three here, again, the holy grail of Meursault. Interestingly enough, Meursault is one of the few that does not have any Grand Crus, but these three are considered at their best. They certainly perform at Grand Cru levels. So the name of the vineyard here, or the main name of the cru, Genévrier, comes from the French word Genévrier. The juniper trees, juniper shrubs that were once grown in this part of Burgundy, and they do, they've said to impart a little bit of florality to the wines. But at their best, again, these wines, coming from where they do here in the southern portion of the Côte de Beaune, they often tend to be some of the richer wines of or white wines of Burgundy. So what that often does is it creates a nice bridge. So anybody who is kind of getting their feet wet with Burgundy might not have a ton of experience with the wines. The richness is very appealing. The wines are full-bodied and very dense and concentrated, and can have a little lush quality to them. The wines age exceptionally well, especially these premier crus, but they do provide a natural bridge from somebody who might have more experience with New World Chardonnays, and they kind of make their way into Burgundy. Meursault is a really, really good starting point. And, both in color and on the nose, and the palate, I mean, there's definitely that intensity and concentration. Silas, I'll turn it over to you for impressions here. What do you think? I mean, obviously, I think this is a wine for the last couple of vintages that has been, rock solid. And I mean, all the Boyo Premier Crus have been super impressive, but this is just kind of another one. And I think this is, to me, this is, beautiful white Burgundy, but it appeals to a lot of Chardonnay drinkers. I mean, obviously, it's serious Burgundy. But it has that it has that appeal to draw a lot of people in, regardless of where their stylistic preference comes from.
Totally, it has a richness, a depth to it that is really attractive. But what I'm struck by is the intensity on the nose. I mean, it's so floral, but also it has that like rich kind of like kind of ripe apple quality. Oh, it's really nice. A little
Yeah.
smoky flint almost. I mean, you can talk about reduction. It's
Sure.
I don't think it's reduced, but it does have that kind of flinty quality a little bit.
Yeah.
I also often with Meursault pick up on the nose a bit of a buttery brioche, which I tend to associate with that wine from, well, not that wine, but the top vineyards in Meursault.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim had asked, I'll pop in. Jim had asked if this is 100% Chardonnay, so that is going to be the rule in Meursault. From a village standpoint, a small bit of red wine is made, but this is primarily going to be white wine territory at its best, Chardonnay at its best, and almost exclusive. Not quite, but just about. So.
Jim, the wine laws in France are very strict around the nation. And with regard to wine calling itself white Burgundy, it has by law to be 100% Chardonnay. They're not allowed to blend anything else. And even if they did, there's so little else that they grow there, apart from maybe some aligoté for a
Sure.
different wine, and a very rare bit of Pinot Blanc. But no, it's all white Burgundies you can assume are 100% Chardonnay by law.
Even the other white grape that Simon mentioned, Aligoté, they make every bottling where kind of a scarlet letter, you have to put Bourgogne Aligoté. You have to actually say that it's not Chardonnay. You can't just call it a Bourgogne because it could, be associated with mistaken for a Chardonnay. God forbid.
Simon, what are your thoughts on, obviously, this is one of those wines where, for all intents and purposes, I mean, on the label itself, Premier Cru, but, at its best, this can often be, Grand Cru caliber. But from just painting with a broad brush, what's your thought in your experience over the years in terms of ageability of the top end Premier Crus? Obviously, whites can get, white's much different than reds, and in terms of overall ageability. But what do you think as far as the assuming there's the bottle itself is sound and the storage is sound. I mean, obviously every bottle there's always going to be some inherent risk, about pushing it too far. But what do you think as far as the best Premier Crus under perfect circumstances? How long can they go?
I think I would say minimum of 5 years. I mean, this is barely showing anything other than just his youthfulness at the moment,
yeah,
which is delicious. But nonetheless, as the wine ages, it takes on this lovely nutty quality, which I think 5 to 10 years for. I mean, I would certainly stretch it out to 10 years and not be the least bit concerned. And love to try it again, maybe 15 or even 20, because I think it will last that long. It's got the acidity to support the fruit, which is so important. We talk about this almost every tasting.
Yeah. That
how important it is to have acidity in a wine that acts as the structure, as the backbone for the fruit. 10 years, I'd love to try this in 10 years' time. And then answer your question again.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if I'm not mistaken, Boyau only uses a special type of closure called DM closure. So if anyone's familiar here with white Burgundy, there is a scourge called premature oxidation, Premox. And that was really in the last 2 decades that there are a lot of bottles that should have been, reaching just their peak of maturity were way past their prime. And a huge push is to try different enclosures than a traditional cork. So DM is actually a cork conglomerate that's sorted based on molecular density. It's very, very exact.
Yeah.
It does a great job with white wine, I think. So it's exciting to see that kind of being adopted in Burgundy.
So DM is presumably then less porous. Sorry, the DM is less porous than just natural cork. Yeah,
correct. Because they're able to sort the bits based on uniform density. You don't have as we in our business we see so many seeping corks and stuff that we have to reject. And most of the time, the cork is actually fine. It's just the wine has found a small little pathway through the natural, deficiencies of the cork bark. And that's just how it is. Even a high-end cork is going to have, a slight, patch of low density that the wine can escape through. So I think it's a good move. Honestly, it's more of a sure thing. They also wash it with supercritical CO2 in the process, thereby removing any source of TCA cork taint. So you have a foolproof, bottle closure right there.
Yeah.
So is there much track record of age with DM corks or not yet?
They only came about I think 10, 15 years ago. So I think they're just starting to see some of the trials bear fruit, but everything is showing really well. So I think everything, more and more people are adopting it, especially in Burgundy. We haven't seen it break through the front lines of any of the high-end Bordeaux yet, but I think they're really gunning for that.
So
I think I don't know if anybody else, but I think we're breaking up a little bit, so we have to just be a little bit patient with each other. I'm cutting in when I shouldn't because you're still talking.
it's all right. Well, we will transition into the Aubert, which is, I mean, both of these are exciting wines, but certainly looking forward to trying this Aubert, which, again, all of Marc Aubert's wines have reputations, deservedly so, for being, Grand Cru quality, but also distinctively California. And, just a little bit of backstory on, Marc Aubert. So he's a California native, grew up in Napa Valley and actually in St. Helena. And he cut his teeth working for Rutherford Hill and Monticello wineries before his big break came from the famous Helen Turley, who was working at Peter Michael at the time. So Marc Aubert actually, despite having this reputation for making Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays of high renown now, actually started his background, or like at least his early career, was spent at Peter Michael and Colgan. He actually succeeded, funnily enough, Helen Turley at Colgan as well. So in the early portion of the 2000s, Marc Aubert was making some of the Colgan wines. So, a great Cabernet winemaker, but much like Thomas Rivers Brown, who makes the wines for Schrader and Maybach, some of those, high-end elite Cabernets, and he consults for some of those, high-end, or Thomas Rivers Brown now and Marc Aubert back in the day, being a consultant winemaker for some of these big Cabernet labels. Their passion, Thomas Rivers Brown under his own Rivers Marie label now, making Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs. Marc Aubert kind of the same way. So it was always passionate about the wines from Burgundy, despite the fact that the early portion of his career was, again, making those red wines. So actually his kind of epiphany wine, he always says, was the 1990 Comme la Faune Montrachet Grand Cru. So that's, needless to say, a great wine. But he always wanted to his passion was always about finding a way to identify, top elite caliber California vineyards that could turn out wines there that would be of Burgundy quality. But to me, the one thing I've always respected about Aubert, and it's unmistakable in his wines, as we transition and to try this wine, and anybody who's had Aubert wines in the past, there's no mistaking that the wines are California. And I think, to me, that's a testament to Aubert and being able to kind of draw his line in the sand, saying that I'm going to make wines of the highest caliber. And yes, they can compete with Burgundy. And yes, there are certain techniques and things that he's modeled after Burgundy, but it's very infrequent that somebody would try a top end wine, or any wine from Aubert, because frankly, everything that he makes is at the top end, and say, oh, this reminds me of, this is a dead ringer for Burgundy. You say the quality is Burgundy, but its roots are always going to be, distinctively California. And to me, I think it's super impressive. He's not trying to be something that he's not. The wines, he's the first to say he wants the wines to be, it almost sounds like he's the first to say it. He wants the wines to almost be a little bit, rich and voluptuous. And he's even used the word hedonistic to describe his own wines, which again, sometimes has a negative connotation, but the wines are so remarkably balanced and concentrated and dense. But you look on a label and you see, oh my God, how can a wine that's so often the Chardonnay is, tipping the scales at high 14% in the alcohol, in the alcohol category, sometimes tipping over 15%, but the wines are remarkably well balanced. So his secret, he's again identified 9 or 10 sites within Sonoma and Napa Valley, the majority of which are long-term leases. He does have a couple of estate vineyards of this his crown jewel tonight. The Lauren Vineyard is his estate vineyard that he planted in the early 2000s. But he sources from the some of the renowned vineyards in Napa, Carneros, like the Hyde Vineyard and the Hudson Vineyard. But the Lauren Vineyard, again, his crown jewel, and the other 2 vineyards, the CIX, the 109, is another really top end. And he also makes the Sugar Shack estate vineyard from Napa Valley in Rutherford, which you would think, how can somebody in the heart of Napa Valley make a Chardonnay that is, it's a warm pocket of Napa Valley. It's typically Cabernet territory. But he finds a way through deft winemaking and just really knowing what he's doing to turn out a wine that's super well balanced and just impeccable. So the Lauren Vineyard that we're trying tonight, again, planted in the early 2000s, and it was originally an old apple orchard. And if we could share the screen here. So just to kind of give you an idea of where we're at here. So, obviously San Francisco and San Pablo Bay here, we've got Napa. We are in the broad, very broad Sonoma Coast, AVA, which and he's a little bit inland here, at least with the where the Lauren Vineyard here is here in Forestville. Not only is a Sonoma County AVA very broad, but as you can see, just even within here, you're getting and this speaks to the diversity, but so many different styles of wine. You can literally grow anything, and there's great stuff from Sonoma, everything from Chardonnay to Sauvignon Blanc to Zinfandel to unique expressions of Cabernet and Pinot Noir, and that's just some of the main ones. Obviously, you have some of the more esoteric grapes. But Sonoma County is a very broad AVA, of which the sub AVAs narrow it down into the Russian River Valley, which is where we're going to be at here in the Lauren Vineyard. And if we could, we're actually going to be right in here. So we've got the broader Sonoma, and we're going to be inland quite a bit. So they've always referred to the Russian River Valley as a cooler portion of what is otherwise a warm pocket. So you'll actually see some really unique Zinfandels from the Russian River Valley, in the same area, for all intents and purposes, in the same area that you would otherwise see Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So it's not typical that you would see those types of grapes grown together, but that just speaks to how diverse, the region is as a whole, and how much variance and diversity there can be just within, neighboring vineyards. And you go a couple miles north, south, east, or west, and it can be entirely different. It can be entirely different climates. So again, as I mentioned, the Lauren Vineyard was originally an old apple orchard. It's a small 8-acre property named after Mark Aubert's daughter, Lauren. And the key here, the Gold-rich soils, which are prominent in the Russian River Valley, and especially this pocket here, a sandy loamy mix with very high natural minerality. This was once an ancient seabed, and there's a lot of fossilized seashells in the sublayers of these soils to impart that minerality. So you're going to get rich concentrated fruit, but there's always unmistakable minerality in these wines. And, from a critical perspective, the Lauren, and this is saying something because so many of the Aubert wines receive such high press, but since its inception and since this vineyard came online for Aubert, the wine's never scored less than 95 points from Wine Advocate, which is crazy. I mean, talk about, just overall consistency. It's got 8 vintages of 98 points or better. The one we're trying tonight has the potential. It's got a barrel score that tips at 100, so it could very well be, re-rated as a 100-point wine. And we're trying the 19 tonight, but the 18 was referred to or scored 100 points from James Suckling, and he thought it to be one of the best California Chardonnays he's ever had. But that's been consistent, whether it be Venice. Antonio Goloni is a huge fan of this specific wine. Lisa Parati Brown, James Suckling. I mean, these are wines that live up to the hype. And I just think, to me, again, there's no mistaking that they are California. They're not trying to be anything other than it, but the concentration and intensity is so noticeable, but the balance is unmistakable as well. And I know, Silas, when you were sampling the wines earlier a couple of days ago, you were impressed. I mean, how is it? I mean, that's kind of an understatement, but where does everything kind of stack up today now that you got it in the glass and we're enjoying it live in real time here? What do you think?
No, I'm super impressed by the balance, and it's also, I see the word hedonistic, but it's also very balanced. It has nice acid, nice minerality. It is pretty rich, I have to say, but not in an offensive way. It's a pleasurable wine. It's really nice. It has a beautiful kind of almost perception of sweetness. I doubt it's sweet, but it has that kind of succulent, ripe fruit to it. It's quite lovely.
Yeah. Simon, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting, actually, just if you all have both wines in the glass still, and just tip the glass and look at the color of the two, and you'll see clearly that the Aubert is quite a bit deeper in color, almost a golden, light gold compared to the Meursault. And the nose, much more intense, not intense, because the Meursault is certainly intense, much more almost tropical, but in a nice way. Richer, more voluptuous style of wine entirely. On the palate, there's this roundness, this weight on the wine that is not in the least bit offensive. And I'm not trying to be detrimental on this. It's just a very different style of wine to the Meursault, but it's, again, lovely balance, just a much bigger, fuller, and as Silas said, there's almost this perception of it being sweet, and yet it is not at all. It's just a very ripe style.
And using that as a perfect jumping off point, back to Marc Aubert, who often says, I mean, he wants his wines, and again, there's almost that perception of sweetness, but he's a big believer in ripe fruit. He's always said that, nobody wants to taste an unripe peach. We want a ripe peach, the white peach flavors that are so prominent and so typical of, this portion of the Russian River. The intensity of the fruit almost gives, and it's almost kind of the same way in dry Riesling. When you can get a really well-made dry Riesling that has deep intensity of fruit, but needless to say, there's, the intensity of fruit can often be conflated with, sweetness. And I think that's where, the wine, like you said, is by no means sweet, but, Aubert is always going to pick at the maximum ripeness that he can without getting the wines out of balance. And I think that, I think it's going to be an impressive wine. It's still obviously a young wine. Aubert's always been one to say that he's a big believer in decanting his own wines, double decanting his wines, and he often feels that they show better hours later, sometimes even the next day, which you normally wouldn't think for a white wine, you would think that, it's the red wines that take quite a bit of time to open up. But so if anybody does have Aubert in the cellar, I mean, you might already very well know that, but it is absolutely a wine that is certainly compelling on a pop and pour, but one of those bottles that will absolutely be, much, much better after a couple hours and a little bit of air. But that's also that's not totally inconsistent with a lot of white wines. I just think that, I think that we sometimes give a little bit more attention from a, preparation and decanting standpoint to red wines, because we know those wines are often, those younger wines are tighter and need air, but white wines, especially at the top end, can benefit, just as much. And I think that, Aubert is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that point.
I think that, and yeah, that and not serving them too cold.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I mean, you got to the point of this whole tasting, which I didn't really mention, is that, we're trying to show how, even going beyond the Chardonnay, even looking at Chardonnay, it's talking about how serious it can be. And people treat, red wine with such reverence, when white wine can, really provide such a different experience, but no less profound, in my opinion.
Yeah. Silas, do we have
we have
poll set up here?
Yeah, let's do a poll. So yeah, let us know which one was your favorite.
And to remind you, the Boyo wine was the first of the two.
Thank you, Simon. I think we have most people. All right, can you see that?
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I think you hit it on the head, Gerard, where the Bouillot has a richness that's very inviting, but has that kind of crystalline minerality that I associate more with and beautiful acid.
Yeah.
I think it's fun. Obviously, these are good examples of white wines that their best days are, a couple of years and half a decade still ahead of them. These are certainly impressive wines now, but it's just remarkable how, obviously how all wine changes over the course of its, as it evolves, both in the glass and then longer term in the cellar. But Chardonnay especially, I think that it's one of those wines that just tracking the wine, it's where it's not always easy to from just the reality of first of all getting access to the something like an Aubert, and obviously it's a little bit prohibitive because it's not an everyday drinking wine in terms of its cost, but it is one of those wines that's always fascinating to track as best you can over the course of not just an evening, but over the course of its lifetime. If you're fortunate enough to have 6 or 12 bottles in the cellar, much different wines 6 months compared to a year from now, compared to 5 years from now, and the Aubert, much like the Henri Boillot, where Simon was mentioning, as far as the longevity of it, I mean, there's still the 2005 Aubert, I know that Antonio Galloni was talking about how that's just been one of his, aha moments for California wine in general. That the 2005 Aubert Lauren Vineyard is still drinking exceptionally well to this day. And you're talking about 16 years for a domestic Chardonnay. It's not to say that all domestic Chardonnay is going to last, but it speaks, number one, to the caliber of or the potential and the longevity for the best wines, and obviously the pedigree of this very, very special vineyard. And there's a reason that this one continues to get the scores and the press that it does year after year. And the wines have super wide open drinking windows. So catch them when they're young, when it's fun. But as we all, the three of us know, and I'm not sure, how much experience those joining have with like, more mature, just mature Chardonnay can be absolutely, you'll run into some, some like uninspiring bottles, but when Chardonnay is it's a much different animal when it has just a couple years of age on it, let alone 10, 12, 15 years of age on it, and some of the more exuberant fruit kind of subsides, and you're getting a much totally different expression of the grape that speaks to, it's a fascinating grape. It's one of those grapes that it can be a little bit of a chameleon, but when it's good, and certainly as it matures and ages, it's fascinating stuff. So with that, I will turn it back over to you guys so we can get over to the other side of the world with some interesting stuff.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, before we move on, Jim did say, do you get any smokiness? And other people said they get more, they get more spice than smoke. Which I kind of have to agree with, I would say. I might be maybe not a smoky quality, but like, yeah, I would say more so spice.
Yeah.
But anyway, I get to present now. It's a lovely, lovely flight. I'm a huge fan of these wines. So we're going to start, I'm going to start with the Chevalier de Sternberg, the Hermitage Blanc. So this is a product of the domain called Jabalais, and it's a pretty old domain. They had their heyday in the mid to late 20th century, and they were predominantly, they had domain holdings in both the Hermitage, which we're going to talk about, Gros Hermitage, which surrounds the hill of Hermitage, but they were also a famous negociant, and Gerard mentioned what negociant is. So they purchased fruit from both Côte-Rôtie and Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and made phenomenal wines from those holdings. And that kind of waned, not just with the death of the proprietor, but also with the emergence of a lot of grower producers. So in Côte-Rôtie and other areas around the North Rhone, there was in the 80s and then going into the 90s, and of course nowadays, a lot of the farmers that previously sold their their really nice fruit, because they're passing down through generations these plots, but they would sell their fruit, or there would be a sharecropping situation. So a lot of the fruit was available to negociants who actually had the money to pay for it. So those wines are legendary, especially the Côte-Rôtie and the Châteauneuf, for being phenomenal renditions of the appellation, because they're probably using fruit that now goes into the top cuvées of the appellation unit. So as I mentioned, Jabalais kind of fell in hard times with the death of the proprietor in 1997. So that kind of heralded, but it was also kind of a long decline. It was a ground shifting. It was really too bad, because it was the La Chapelle, their main wine from Hermitage, it's a red wine made with Syrah, was kind of a beacon of Syrah and French wine in general. And to see that kind of drop off a cliff in the late 90s and early 2000s was pretty disappointing. But if you do stumble across those older bottles, they're still going so strong. It's incredible. The old La Chapelles are really great. So the domain really languished a little bit, but then the Frey family, which are a real estate family, came in and purchased it in 2006. And they infused a lot of money and energy into the domain that was really necessary for the turnaround. They installed their daughter, Caroline Frey, the eldest daughter, Caroline Frey, as the director of winemaking. She'd already been involved in their Bordeaux project, their Bordeaux winery, La Lagune, and they're also involved in Champagne. They're one of the larger shareholders of Biacart-Sémon, if you're familiar with that domain. But yeah, so Caroline and the Frey family, they gave Jabalais a much needed facelift. She quickly changed all the viticulture to organic, and now is moving towards biodynamic, really shifting the the paradigm from the late 80s and 90s. Everyone started using kind of pesticides and fungicides to cut corners and make their difficult jobs at least a little easier. And they're kind of drawing back on that because of the devastation that caused to a lot of the biodiversity that was necessary to have a healthy vineyard. So she's kind of reoriented that in a really positive direction. But yeah, let's take a quick look at where I'm going to share my screen. So we are going to the Hill of Hermitage. So here you can see France, of course. You see the Alps. The Alps are kind of the defining feature of a lot of the topography, but also the weather, which is hugely important. As you can see, there's this is the Rhone Valley right here. You can kind of see it just generally with the lack of foliage. So it's pretty well settled, but you see a lot of winds come in and out because it skirts the side of this side of the massif of the Alps and creates just a lot of wind passage pretty much. So the astral wind, the cold wind is often credited for changing a whole harvest. You can have this chilly wind come in and really, cool things down. So it's a pretty cool area. So we are zooming in, and this is all granite, really old, cold rock, pretty poor in nutrients, and because everything has just been weathered and, it's seen so much time on the Earth's surface that it just doesn't have much to give anymore. So I've exaggerated the topography a little bit, but you can see that this is a pretty steep, narrow valley. So granite is very hard rock. So the Rhone River, which is here, has spent eons slowly carving its way through this rock. And what the result is these beautiful steep hillsides. And one of the quirkiest ones is the Hill of Hermitage. When everything else in this north-south running valley is pretty much predominantly east or west facing, the Hill of Hermitage, as you can see, is at a huge bend in the river. So it's just perfectly south facing, and it's really steep and kind of jets out on its own. This is a pretty flat plain behind it, and it just dominates the landscape. So as we zoom in a little bit more, you can tell the whole thing is planted with vineyard. This is pretty much the outline, as I'm tracing it, of the appellation, and every inch is planted in an incredible degree. I mean, this is a steep hill, so they have different trellising techniques, all reinforcement walls. I mean, it's just been pieced together over the centuries to make this really incredible feat of human ingenuity and viticulture and love of wine. So yeah, it's most famous for its red wines. Its Syrah, Hermitage Rouge is, a breathtaking wine by any standard, and enjoyable in its youth, but can stand the test of time and create these gorgeous aromas of violets and gorgeous fruit, nice acid, just a really, really enjoyable wine. Kind of get a little leathery, you can get a little funk, not quite as funky as Côte tea, but really gorgeous wines. They also produce white wine, which is what we're enjoying. So this is Jabouillet's, they call it the Chevalier de Sternberg. This is their main white wine. They do produce in very exceptional seasons, they produce a La Chapelle Blanc, but they haven't produced that in over a decade. So this is their dominant wine. And so the grapes are Marsanne and Roussanne. And it's predominantly Marsanne. So it's about 75% Marsanne, and the rest is Roussanne. And this is, the grapes are distinctly tropical. I love these wines because they have a coolness to the fruit, it's a very distinct grape varieties. And I went to school in Walla Walla, Washington, and they do grow Marsanne and Roussanne. And the first time I tried it, I was so struck by the notes because I'd never smelled a white wine like that before. You know, growing up and only really being introduced to, you know, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc. That's pretty much it. So having this kind of aroma as a young person was just was pretty incredible. I was like, wow, stopped me in my tracks. But as a freshness to it, I'm a huge fan of these wines. So this is how they get the texture is the grape itself, but they also barrel ferment all these wines. So one thing about white wine you have to understand is that a lot of the choices in winemaking will really change the way the wine tastes. So first and foremost, how the wine is actually fermented. If it's fermented in stainless steel, which tends to be pretty inert, but also kind of keep things in stasis. So if you naturally have a lot of ripeness, you can kind of preserve that pretty well. Otherwise, you kind of, say with Chablis, you get like a steely character because that's what you had in the beginning. It doesn't really hide anything, but it also doesn't really help you in if you're trying to, say, balance a wine that isn't naturally, you know, say, thick in the mid palate. So a big thing that winemakers talk about with fermenting in wood is that it gives more surface area for the yeast to hold on to pretty much. So you have really healthy fermentations, but you also get the small amount of oxygen through the porous wood. And so it helps build the mid palate. A lot of winemakers will talk about barrel fermenting as really building that mid palate. And by that, I mean, you know, you have the initial attack when you taste a wine, and then you have kind of literally the mid palate. You have this taste in the middle of your mouth. And sometimes it can be quite short. You can have length on the back end. You can still taste the wine, but it didn't last very long in your mouth. There wasn't much complexity. So that complexity really comes out in the mid palate. That's where I think complexity flourishes. You can have complexity in other stages, but I'm a huge, let's taste this wine. So I almost get a similar level of richness to the Aubert. I mean, I think it's a great transition, honestly, because I get this beautiful orchard fruit, some spice. Oh, a beautiful weight, beautiful texture. It's not heavy, but it has a presence, it has a distinct, almost like, I don't want to say oiliness, but it's viscous. It's more viscous, but it's not heavy. And that's the beauty of, I think, these white wines is, you know, this is an area that can get pretty hot, but these varieties are so attuned to this climate that they can ripen perfectly while retaining enough natural acidity to stay fresh and keep the alcohols in, you know, relative good stage. What do you guys think of this wine?
So for me, I think you hit the nail on the head with just kind of painting an outline for the descriptors. I mean, to me, the fascinating thing about just the Rhone whites in general, you know, the Northern Rhone whites, it's one of those things where, you know, at least to me, when I taste, I'm reminded, yes, like I'm drinking a Northern Rhone white, but I always find it fascinating because there's just such a range of to me, they're just wild, you know, they're just wild wines that offer so much that it's hard for me to pinpoint and say, you know, a Northern Rhone wine tastes like X. You know, I think that to me, I always find them to be more about, like you were saying, just to me, the texture is what makes the Northern Rhone wines, or Northern Rhone whites for that matter, not easy to peg, but like they all have, you know, they all share that similar quality. When it comes into, flavor profile or what, my perception is of fruit, I think it really runs the gamut, and it makes it an exciting and just super interesting region to taste. But it's a tough one to pin down. I mean, I always think, the melon, like you said, I mean, there's this very rich concentrated fruit. And I think you had almost kind of, steered yourself away from saying an oily texture. That's what I get, honestly. I think it is, let's call it, I mean, at least to me, I would call it what it is. And I don't think it's a bad thing, because it doesn't mean that the wine is heavy. It doesn't mean the wine is goopy. Clearly it's not. I mean, like you had mentioned before, Hermitage in its essence is about, just that granite and just that stoniness. So it's always, that fruit is always going to be balanced by that intense, stoniness and minerality, which is why I always find just that juxtaposition fascinating. So it can have that little bit of, that little bit of oiliness. That to me is not a bad thing at all, because I think there's so much else going on, and it's such a well-balanced and interesting line that it's just fascinating stuff. I just think it's super, super interesting. Simon, what do you think?
Really, really interesting wine. Bearing in mind that these two grapes, Marsanne and Roussanne, are also grown down in the southern Rhone in Châteauneuf-du-Pape as well, where there's a totally different iteration of it, much more oily and full. Here, you've got, I think, the essence of these two grapes in that there's the lovely balance, the very approachable. We haven't yet got to the Chave wine, which will be fun as a comparison, but this is really very, very interesting. And for those people who have not had, we talk about Northern Rhone white wines, but there are others so that are not made from Marsanne and Roussanne. But the Marsanne and Roussanne blends, many of you probably have not had these before. And I hope that this is a great introduction to you to what can come out of the Hill of Hermitage in the way of a white wine, which is clearly drinkable now. The aging potential with white Hermitage is depending on the producer. I think I prefer them when they're on the younger side, and not too much age. I mean, 5-8 years maybe. I find after that they tend to get a bit funky. That's a generalization, but nonetheless, I think this is drinking beautifully now. Absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
And Debbie mentions, this, she says, this really makes me salivate and keep the flavor going. I totally agree. It has that mid palate that I was talking about. It has that mid palate complexity. It's also very long, and it has great acid. So it makes you salivate a little bit. And that's like the biggest marker. People say, oh, how can you tell if something's, acidic, a wine is very acidic or not? Because we always talk about acid. And it's, if you feel it, if you feel your salivary glands, activating, that's acid right there. That is an acidic wine right there. And that's why it's so friendly for food. I love these wines. I love Hermitage Blanc for food. This wine, has the body to hold up to, a roast chicken. Like I would have this as a, with a main, because it's such a lovely wine in terms of the structure, the acidity, but also the fruit structure, the density of fruit. It's really nice.
Good stuff. It's a good question, Silas. What is the the ABV of this one?
I'm not sure actually. I don't have the bottle with me, unfortunately. I'll get back to you on that one. Well, I'll follow up tomorrow with all the alcohols because I'm curious now, because I don't have the Aubert either, and it didn't show hot at all, so I'm curious what it is. Before it gets too late, we should move on to the Chave Blanc. Oh wow. Okay. That's gonna be a great one. That's good. That's a great one. But all right, Chave. So Domaine Jean-Louis Chave is one of the oldest estates in the area. They have been around since the late 1400s, producing wine in the region. originally across the pond or across the river in Saint Joseph, and they've actually returned to Saint Joseph to create some of the best wines of the appellation. But they're more known for their Hermitage Rouge and their Hermitage Blanc. Honestly, they cost the same nearly now, and their reverence is, I would say, almost equal. The reverence for these wines is on par, which is incredible for a white wine from an estate to be on par with something as great as their red is just speaks volumes to the level of quality this domain puts out year in, year out. What's unique about this domain, and I'm going to share one more screen, is that they have holdings. This is the Hill of Hermitage again, and this is all the Lieu dit, the named places. So this is, around each difference in topography. As I said, it's a south-facing hill as a whole, but you can see there's like a little valley here. This is also higher elevation up by the chapel that gives the name, the La Chapelle, there it is, the chapel. The name for Hermitage, the hermit, is up here. This was a soldier who supposedly walked up and built this chapel and walled himself off in there for years. It was the hermit. But you can see that they've named, after just years of tasting these wines, people have just naturally delineated, differences in slope, differences in soil, and the result is all these named places. What's really cool about Jean-Louis Chave, doing Jean-Louis Chave, is they have holdings across the whole area, but they only produce, well, in most years, they only produce one red and one white. And that is because they believe that no matter the year, they are going to create a blend that is most representative of the terroir, of the Hill of Hermitage, but also the vintage. They don't believe in elevating Les Bussards because of its power. They think it is integral in creating a balanced wine. And that's what's really cool about these wines is, as we said, you're getting richness from the steep south-facing slopes. You may be getting a little bit even more from the flatter areas. You're getting a lot of ripeness, but lower acids and higher alcohols. And then the higher you go, you get maybe more delicate aromas, but you get lower alcohols and less ripeness. So it all kind of enmeshes in blending to create a really balanced wine. And yeah, these as well, let's try it right now. These wines are phenomenal. Wow, that is it's not wholly different, but it has a much more floral, in my opinion. So this is a younger wine. This is the 2018.
It's almost honeyed.
Yeah. Yeah. But once again, it's got great acid. Nice finish. It's
I mean, that's a mouthful when it comes to a white wine. And I think it would be fascinating to put this into a dark glass in a dark room, and you have no idea what color the wine is. Yeah. And I wonder how many of us would pick it out as possibly a red wine because of the weight, because of the complexity, the concentration, and
I think to me it's an example of some, I mean, using Javelet, a very nice wine as as a baseline. To me, this is taking something and just turning up just turning up the intensity and turning up the volume of just every little thing. It doesn't mean that it's a bigger, bolder wine. It just means that everything is a little bit more precise. Everything is just a little bit more delineated. And it's not, this does not speak to, that does not take anything away from the Jabolet, which, qualitatively is a really, really nice wine. Like actually, I've had this wine not super recently, but this is a really, really nice showing for the Jabolet. But I think the Chave, the pedigree of the Chave, and just everything is just ratcheted up just a little bit as well. It should be. It's Chave, but it just speaks to just the overall precision. And Silas, like you were saying, I think you'd be hard pressed to find another producer in the world who makes there's certainly plenty of red wine producers that make a respectable, really nice white wine. There's a lot of white wine producers that make some really nice, respectable red wines. But you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who makes both wines at the level that Chave does. It's you're talking about. You could take away Chave's Hermitage Rouge and let this be a standalone, and you're talking about one of the truly one of the the benchmarks for the for Hermitage in the Northern Rhone, but one of the benchmark whites and most unique whites in the world, period. And that speaks nothing to the the incredible Syrah that he makes. So I think it's just these are the kinds of things that we love, and we obviously we three of us love enjoying these, and hopefully this is what makes these types of tastings fun to share. We put a lot of we do our best to create the theme and draw nice parallels between everything, but the ability to on a Thursday night in July, taste or August, taste a little Chave Blanc with the team and with our friends in Illinois. So it's a lot of fun.
I think sorry, go ahead, Todd.
No, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, Jim asked, is this a similar blend? And it is. It is predominantly Marsanne, and then the rest is Roussanne. So Simon mentioned there is other grape varieties in the North Rhone, the other being Viognier, pretty much. You have many others in the South Rhone, of course, with the 13 permitted varieties in Chateauneuf. But Viognier is by far the dominant variety in the North Rhone. So I think it's extra special that we get to taste two top flight Marsanne Roussanne blends, because these grapes are produced in much smaller quantities.
So let's throw up the poll.
I think to use a Burgundy analogy. I think to use a Burgundy analogy for these two. This is all. So we're talking same grape varieties in this point. This is really like a top Puligny Montrachet Premier Cru tasting next to Le Montrachet. Yeah. So same region, same grapes, but you're stepping up 4 levels or more on what is, from the Jabolet wine, an exceptionally good wine.
Absolutely, yeah.
The Chave is in a world on its own.
Yeah, what a phenomenal wine.
Yeah.
And Simon, you mentioned that you don't like the Hermitage Blancs with age on them, but Chave Blanc is one of the exceptions that a lot of people reference as one of the most long-lasting wines ever. People have talked about Chave Blanc from 1921 still holding up. These wines, a lot of people talk about drinking Chave Blanc either young or waiting at least 20 years, because there's this adolescence period that feels kind of muted and not nearly as ethereal as we're getting now. So it's a fascinating wine in that sense, where either drink it young, either drink this $300 bottle of white wine right off the bat, or wait at least 20 years.
Yeah, now I always think it's fascinating to to read some of the professional reviews of the guys and girls who say that the best Cheval Blanc vintages will outlive the majority of us, and it speaks obviously to the pedigree of the wine and freaks me out about my own mortality, but it's one of those things that it is crazy to think that it is it's a white wine that exactly. I think you nailed it. I mean, catch it young when it has a totally different profile in its youth, and then shuts down hard for a while, and then it's one of those wines that 20 years 30 years later is just remarkable and remarkable stuff. So it's a lot of fun.
With that, I'm gonna throw up a poll just to see which ones you guys like more.
I'll be the first to say I don't care what the poll says. I mean, I think the Chave is obviously a stunning wine. I think the Jaboulet, I don't want to say it exceeded my expectations, because that means that I just think that I think the Jaboulet is a beautiful, beautiful wine and needs to be respected as such. I think that it's a nice thing. I mean, let's be honest, Chave Blanc is not going to be Chave Blanc is not an everyday wine. It's a special, it's a special wine. But the idea of getting that type of quality at the price that the Jaboulet comes in at, I think it's one of those wines that I would strongly recommend. And I know we have a little bit of it. I'm not sure, Silas, if it's in Chicago now or on its way to us, but it's something that I think that is definitely something that I would strongly recommend people grabbing a couple of and tucking away and seeing, because of any of the wines, the ability to evolve and change. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun in the next couple of years for sure.
Yeah, we do have some of this exact wine in stock.
Yeah.
So and it doesn't last long, let me tell you. So the clear favorite being Chave Blanc, no surprise. I think the Jaboulet, as you said, is a phenomenal wine in its own right, and it's I love the Burgundy analogy, honestly, because it is an area where it is a relatively small geographic area, the hill. So it's it is a practice in terroir, but also producer. Chave blows it out of the water every time. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
So with that, I think it should be enjoyed with me as well. Yeah, Michelle, I think it would be a great wine to have with a main. I would almost love to have it be with like Korean barbecue right off the bat.
I like it, but I would agree. I think it's great. I think, and if nothing else, I think that it's the kind of wine that you don't have to pigeonhole yourself. There's a lot of flexibility and versatility with it. You can go a ton of different directions with it and not be, wrong. I think it's one of those wines that'll enhance a lot of different things for sure. But a main, I think Michelle's right on. It's not one of those things that needs to be, with lighter fare. I think it can, obviously can handle something a lot with a lot more muscle for sure.
With that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Simon.
Okay. So we're going to leave France for a moment, because the first of the two wines that I'm presenting this evening is going to be the wine from the Mosel, from Marcus Molitor in Germany. So a quick overall picture of southern Germany, because you can see here the border of Switzerland and France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Austria, and the Rhine River, which is the main river that runs through Germany, comes up through France, with the Alsace wine region being here, and on up and through the Rheingau and through here. The Mosel, which also rises in France, flows up here through the city of Trier, the ancient Roman city of Trier, and then a lot of bends in the river and joins up with the Rhine. So as it comes flowing north from France and comes in through this central section of the Mosel, the Mittel Moselle, as it's called, the famous wine villages of the Mosel: Brandenburg, Bernkastel, Grach, Velen, Zelen, Zelting, excuse me, Erzig, Erden, and so on. And this little strip here is where we're going to focus today. Now, thanks to Hugh Johnson and his wonderful Wine Atlas of Wines, you can see World Atlas of Wines. You can see the town of Bernkastel, and right here is the famous Bernkastel Doctor vineyard. And then we go past Grach, Velen, and up to Zelting. And on the southwest facing slopes, very, very steep slopes of the Mosel, and you can see how steep they are. They go from the river up to 300 meters or 900 feet in a very, very narrow strip of land. And here is the vineyard of Sonnenau. Sonnenau takes its name from, well, here, before we go, you can see there. So now we're looking south. So Zelting is behind us, and here is the strip of vineyards, in particular, the Sonnenau vineyard, with Velen here and Zelting on this bank behind us. Here you can see the steepness of the vineyards and the famous Sonnenau sundial that is actually in the Velen section of Sonnenau, but Zelting is just along the riverbank there. A little close up, you can see here, what is interesting here is to see this massive cliff of slate and the vineyards itself. So let's go back and talk to you a little bit about the wine itself and the producer. So as I mentioned, the precipitous and southwest facing slopes in the middle of Germany's Mosel River are home to some of the world's most iconic vineyards and wines. And it's here in these really steep, sheer cliffs that Riesling is probably at its finest anywhere in the world, producing a wine that is vibrant, great aging potential, and just a wonderfully stylistic wine that could be bone dry, all the way to opulently sweet and rich, which we'll mention in a moment. And one of the most famous of all of the winemakers in the Mosel is Markus Molitor. He is the eighth generation of his family to look after the holdings that they have in Germany, and it's not just in the Middle Moselle. And he took over the reins in the mid-1980s and has built a well-deserved reputation for his meticulous, uncompromising work in both the vineyards and in the cellar. And his approach to winemaking is very much leave nature to itself, and I'll do what I can in the cellar just to help things along with almost no intervention whatsoever. And his crown jewel and all of the holdings they have is in this Zeltinger Sonnenau vineyard. These steep cliffs, as I said, are truly great site for Riesling. Let's go back for a moment and look again. So you can see the river here, and this is at the evening now, and the sun is setting, but you can see how the sun is still shining on all of these vineyards along here. So a real sun trap for and then the river itself acts both as a reflector to reflect more sunlight up onto the vineyards, and also protects, because of the proximity with the river, protects these vines in many instances from frost. No. It acts as also acts as a buffer, and again it protects the vineyard. So Molitor's wine from the Sonnenau vineyard, extremely concentrated, yet exceptionally well balanced, even in its youth, and capable of aging for many, many years to come. Some people may think that German wines that are labeled Spätlese and Auslese, and this one is labeled Auslese, are always on the sweeter side. Spätlese simply means late harvest or fully ripe. Auslese means selected late harvest, and therefore both can often be fermented dry to give a fuller, full-bodied style of dry wine. And to help us with that, Molitor has a coding of where's he gone? Oh, I've lost them. They were there earlier. He's got a coding of capsules, and the capsules themselves go from white, indicating that the wine is dry, to green, indicating that it could be off dry, to gold, which is what we have tonight, which is extremely, or can be extremely sweet. Oh, there we go. So now you can see this is actually really, really interesting, because this, all the way down this line, is the recent. Say it again. I didn't hear you, Silas.
Yeah, you're on your folder.
Okay. Oh. Am I still on my folder?
Yeah, yes.
Oh.
Try to stop sharing.
Oh, sorry, folks. And I'm screen sharing. Oh, I see. Sorry. Okay. Here we go. Is that better? Are we okay now?
Yeah.
Good. Sorry about that. So Riesling all the way down the line here, and you can see this is from Molitor breaking this up. Cabernet, which is the least ripe of his grapes, though fully ripe nonetheless. Spätlese, Auslese, you can see that the grapes starting to darken in color and starting to shrivel. Beer and Auslese, all the way down to Trockenbeer and Auslese. And that, believe it or not, that little shriveled up thing there is that same grape when it's now been affected by noble rot and botrytis. And you can see that he indicates on his chart here, white capsule, green capsule for off-dry, and golden capsule for sweet. So we can have a golden capsule Cabernet, we can have a green capsule Cabernet, we can have a dry white capsule Cabernet. And it's only when we get up to these Ausleses that we start dropping away from what would be the dry wine. Now tonight's wine is a green capsule Auslese. So basically this little box here. He also, and you can't see it, but I'll show you when we get to the end of this slide, the labels. He also labels his wines 1 star, 2 stars, and 3 stars. And basically that's fine, finer, and finest. And tonight we have the Auslese Gold Cap 3 stars. So it basically doesn't get any better than that from his point of view. You can see from the label here, Zelting Soliner. I talked about the village of Zelting, and ER on the end is simply the possessive. So it's from the village of Zelting. Soliner is the vineyard. Auslese is, as we've just seen, the ripeness, and then 3 stars. 2017 vintage. Go back, you can see again, this is really a fascinating photograph, because here's the river way down below. And this is Marcus Molitor in the vineyard, and you can see how steep this is. Absolutely amazing. Slate, there's some grass here as well, but it's mainly slate. And each of these vines has to be staked independently, because there is no way that they can run wires to hold the vines as in many other flatter vineyard lands. And of course, harvesting, you think, my gosh, that must be difficult. Well, there's no such thing as mechanical harvesting for sure. But you think about this, you're not going to be bending double to pick the grapes, because you're almost standing upright because the vine is in front of you. So wine itself. 3-star Auslese, one of the most ripest and most concentrated of the Ausleses in this particular vintage of 17. There is, I'll touch on botrytis when we get to our next wine, but there is absolutely no botrytis, no noble rot on these grapes whatsoever. So that line of grapes I showed you, right in the middle, there's just the middle range, so the greening going to fuller and riper. On the nose, I get this wonderful ripe peaches, mangoes, a little bit of oak, maybe. Hardly noticeable at all. There's a lightness and yet a richness. There's a unctuousness and yet a lively acidity that really complements this entirely. It's a wine which I find quite stunning. There's a note here from one of the wine writers that said the Zonnezur is precise as a Swiss watch. I think, and the aftertaste, you can take a little sip and just goes on and on and on with this wonderful, rich, but not overpowering, not cloying sweetness to it at all. It's lively, but it's sweet. There's no question about that. Silas, what do you think about this?
I totally agree. The striking thing to me is the levity to it, the airiness. You know, the texture is definitely sweet, but it doesn't feel heavy whatsoever. It has beautiful acidity. The aromatics and the fruit profile is just, it doesn't feel cloying, as you said. I'm a huge fan of this wine. You know, this is something where you can drink it on its own, but it would, I mean, with cheese, a cheese course at the end of a long meal, I would be lapping this up. I mean, it would just be.
Yeah. It is so mouthwatering, and it's I mean, even now, well, a minute and a half, 2 minutes after I took my last taste, it's still there in my mouth, and it's still bouncing around, exciting me so much.
I just think when we talk about just, you know, what is, like, you know, what is in its simplest terms. I mean, you know, sometimes we get into the super nitty gritty and you know, talk about the super technical, hyper technical side of everything. Like, what is a balanced wine? I mean, a balanced wine, I mean, it's this is a balanced wine, and, you know, insofar as it has incredible intensity. It's got that, I mean, without question, it's a sweet wine, but the acidity is there, so everything is in balance. It's not that, you know, it's a sweet wine that makes you want to keep drinking it, as opposed to a sweet wine, like you guys said, what it's not, which is it's not cloying at all. It's, you know, it's not heavy. It's not one of those wines that it's not a gritty kind of sweetness. It's a truly delicious kind of sweetness that is a refreshing sweetness that makes you want to drink more of it, with or without food. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. This would age, oh my goodness, 20, 30 years at least.
Yeah.
I think, without any doubt at all. And it's interesting. I mentioned about his different styles. He has umpteen different wines that he's making all at the same time, different degrees of dryness, different of sweetness. And each one of these has its own individual personality. And if you have a chance to try even some of his dry wines, there is still this quality, this pedigree of wines that he is able to produce. I mean, I think he's a remarkable winemaker, and there's by no means. I mean, lots of doors open when you taste smaller source wines. Put it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Somebody's asking what kind of wine to serve this Riesling in. Well, we are using the same glass for all of our wines for the tasting tonight, and we do regularly. This is a Gabriel glass, which, if you see, has this bulge at the bottom coming up to a slight funnel, and we find that with these glasses, they are actually quite ideal for almost every wine, whether it be an old red or a young white wine. They allow the aromas to concentrate slightly as they come up through the bowl of the glass and up out of the lip. I don't know that I would necessarily think that you had to serve Riesling in what is designated as a Riesling glass. As long as you have a glass that does what we've just described here, and it doesn't have to be this Gabriel glass necessarily, but the shape that allows the aromas to open up and then concentrates them slightly as they come up into your face, into your nose, and into your palate with the delivery on the tongue. And
not to beat it. Oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say not to beat a dead horse from what Cyrus was saying earlier, and what I believe I've even kind of said on past tastings. I mean, especially with this kind of wine. I mean, the glassware is, aside from the glassware, just the temperature. I mean, I think, of course, Riesling is a refreshing wine, and it has, obviously we all know it to be. It's a great summer wine, but by all means, I mean, do not serve the wine too cold, and just in the sense of it, you're stripping it of so much of what it can offer. I mean, when the wine is, and obviously you don't want to serve it room temperature or warm or anything like that, but just when it is at that right temperature, and if it has a little bit of chance to really open up, it's just the aromatics just are explosive, and needless to say that the palate is right there with it. So yeah, I just think that especially white wines in general, just err on the side of letting them be. I'd rather serve a white wine that's a little bit warmer than most people think would be at least common. I think that the Riesling especially, and this wine especially, I think it's really nice.
Yeah. So from a sweet wine from Germany, we'll move to what is considered to be probably the most important sweet wine region in entire France, and that is Sauternes. Let me just get back here, and we'll scoot along here. Châteaubriand Sec, one of the premier Grand Crus of Sauternes in 1855. As you probably know, the red wines of Bordeaux were all classified, and so were some of the white wines. The sweet wines, Château d'Yquem was given a premier cru, Grand Cru Premier classification above everybody else, and then there were 9 other properties that were given the Premier Cru classification, and Riesec is one of them. If we look at the map of Bordeaux, you'll see the city here, and all of our red wines, most of our red wines that we've talked about many times before, all come from the Medoc. Just south of the city is Pessac-Lignon, home of Haut-Brion, Le Mission-Haut-Brion, a little bit further south, and Domaine du Chevalier and the like. And then about 40 miles south of the city is the region of Sauternes and Barsac. Generally speaking, I think most of us talk about the whole region as being Sauternes, but the town of Barsac, in fact, has its own small sub-appellation. Within Sauternes are the major properties. And as you can see here, we have Château d'Yquem. And the vineyards of Château d'Yquem that run down, slight slope down here, and almost next door is Châteaubriand Sec, almost contiguous with Château d'Yquem. Riesec extends from the region of Sauternes itself all the way to Fargues, which is out here. Some of their vineyards come out here. It's one of the largest properties in Sauternes, with about 230 acres of not all planted to vines, but on a gravelly, sandy clay soil. It's approximately 230 feet above the level of the Gironde River. And there's a little stream that runs down here called the Ciron. And that's really, really important. We'll come to that in just a moment. Because in the fall, as the weather cools, fog forms from this river and its confluence with the Gironde, the Garonne. And the fog spreads across these vineyards overnight and early morning in particular. And in doing so, it allows for the formation of what we all know as noble rot, Botrytis cinerea. And here's an interesting photograph, early morning harvest, and you can see in the distance there, that line of fog, and that was earlier in the morning covering these vineyards as well. And that fog allows the formation of the Botrytis noble rot on the grapes. In doing so, it will act on the skins of the grapes and help to reduce the water content and naturally concentrate the sugar and flavor compounds within the grapes. Now, if the weather's not right, if they don't warm up during the day, if the sun doesn't come out, then that noble rot will turn to what is known as grey rot, and the grapes will be totally spoiled. But in the right conditions, they will have absolutely perfect Botrytis affected grapes, rather like we saw on the Molitor map. And there's a bunch of the grapes. You can see the seriously infected Botrytis, and these, and then those that have not yet been affected. And this whole process can take weeks. And what will happen at the time of harvest is that the pickers will go through the vineyards and they will pick just these Botrytis affected grapes off the bunch, leave the rest until they in turn are affected by Botrytis. So they won't cut the whole bunch unless it's completely affected. In doing so, you then, as I said, you've got this amazingly complex concentrated wine, grape, excuse me, with sugar and not very much liquid at all. The iconic grape in Sauternes is the Semillon, and this is Semillon, dominates about 90% of the vineyards, followed by Sauvignon, about only 7%, and then Muscatel, and in some cases, a little bit of Sauvignon Gris, not at Riossec. Riossec itself, the history, it dates back to before the revolution, when it was owned by the Carmelite monks, and property was confiscated during the revolution and then sold off as, quote, an object of national heritage, which I just love that. And it we'll confiscate it and then sell it off so we can get some money for it, to Mr. Mahayac, who was time owner of Château La Louvière, which is a property that we know now in Peyssiat-Guignon. There were multiple owners subsequent to that, and it wasn't until 1984 that the property was bought by Domaine Baron de Rothschild. That's the branch of the Rothschild family that owns Château Lafite, not the Mouton branch of the family, two different branches. They spent a lot of money enhancing the property, enhancing the buildings, sorting the grapes much more meticulously, and blending much more meticulously as well. Let's go back here, and so there's the property, Château Riossec, all of these relatively new cellars and aging cellars here. You can see the lay of the land is pretty flat. There's actually a slight slope going down towards the river, obviously, and lots of trees surrounding which help with the protecting the vineyards from frost, new barrel cellar. And there you can see the vineyards sloping down, going towards the lower levels. Semillon on the vines. Oh, we'll go back one for a moment. And the construction, they've got a new fermenting room there now. They've got a modernized pressing area. I mean, they've done an enormous amount of technique and effort to build this property into what it is today. Obviously, traditional Sauternes techniques are used, and the harvest is carried out selected pickings, as I mentioned. So they could go through the vineyard possibly 6 to 8 times in a harvest, just picking the grapes that they consider to be ready for harvesting. Normally takes them around 6 to 8 weeks. They start to botrytis in a good year will start appearing, and the grapes will start shriveling about September. And they could go through to as late as November, just literally depending on Mother Nature. There's an old saying in wine in general that one vine will produce 1 bottle of wine. But in Sauternes, one vine will probably produce no more than 1 glass of wine. The wine's aged in oak, 50% new and 50% old from the Rothschild's own barrel makers, aged for between 18 to 26 months, depending on the vintage. And in 2009, they actually went through and picked just 4 times. It was such a brilliant vintage. There was so much botrytis, and the weather was so fantastic at the time of the harvest that they only needed to go through 4 times rather than having to wait. In addition to this first wine, they also produce a second wine called Carmes de Rieussec, and then a dry white wine, which is labeled R, but just the letter R, de Rieussec, which is, again, Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc. So, talked enough about this wine, time to taste it. As I said, it was a fantastic vintage for Sauternes. Hot, dry summer, cool winters, cool nights, which allowed for the acidity to be retained. Humidity in the fall, which gave us the botrytis that they needed. There's a richness, there's a honeyed quality. No, we thought that the Molitor wine was on the sweet side, but there's this unctuousness now to Rieussec, which just wasn't, I mean, totally different wine, different grape. And this is wine that I think is absolutely fantastic, sort of medium gold colored. There's creme caramel, there's peach, as I said, honey. I get a little bit of beeswax, which I normally pick up when they use Semillon. And it's multi-layered, it's opulent, it's wonderful balance. Really, really, I think, exceptional glass of Sauternes. Somebody's saying with a good pepperoni thick crust pizza. I wouldn't disagree. I think that the contrast of the pepperoni pizza and the spiciness would probably go extremely well with this wine. I mean, the one thing that I preach to everybody about sweet wines, whether it's the Molitor or the Sauternes, please, please, please never serve these wines with sweet, sticky desserts. Try and serve them. You're going to serve them with dessert, which is fine, on their own, or with a dessert that you know is going to be less sweet than the wine. So fresh fruit salad, tart tatin with not too much caramel. As I said, raspberries, strawberries, fruit like that. Or I think Silas mentioned earlier with the sweet wine, it's really interesting to serve these with some cheeses, and even some blue cheese, not something as strong as Roquefort or Stilton, but some of the milder blue cheeses, and you've got this wonderful yin and yang, and this contrast of the sweetness of the wine and the saltiness of the cheese, and they just come together and it's magic. It really is. Now I want pizza, says Jim. Don't we all? Guy, back to you for any observations or questions? Silas?
The biggest thing I would say is the marked contrast with the level of botrytis. I mean, this is just like it's a classic. There's like, it's hard to describe the smell of botrytis, but it's so distinct. It's more earthen. It's almost umami. It's like this this inflection in the nose rather than an array of flavors.
I think I speak for everybody when
I mean,
I say,
we go to the store, we buy raisins. Go ahead, Gerard.
no, I was going to say, I think I speak for everybody when I say thank you for this. This is like a 400 level class in sweet wines, because this is a great example. I mean, look, this is an area, this wine in particular, and just the understanding of everything that kind of goes into it and what makes it, we're truly one of the world's most unique wine regions. And it's frankly, it's a region that I don't, for all my education, it's not my strongest region by any stretch. It's a fascinating wine for me to drink and enjoy, but just understanding what goes into making it such a unique region, and just that, obviously the visuals, both with the Molitor and the Riesec. I mean, just it really, really elevates it and makes it, it just makes it so much, more relatable and understanding, because it's much different wine. I mean, obviously the techniques and it's still winemaking at the end of the day, but it's just much different wine. And I just think it's a very, very good, impressive wine, but also impressive presentation. So thank you.
Well, it's interesting because making wine in Sauternes is, for the most part, not really a money-making project. I mean, as I said, you're getting one glass of wine out of each vine, if you're lucky. And in some years, for example, 93, 77, and again in 2012, Riesec didn't make any sweet wine because the harvest the climate wasn't right, the weather wasn't right for it. So, I mean, 3 years that I can think of, that there was basically, they made a dry white wine, but there was no market. I mean, there was nothing. I mean,
That's wild.
And we talk about people who go into the wine business. If you want to make a small fortune in the wine business, you start with a large one.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to Sauternes, if you want to own a property in Sauternes, it's yeah. Oh, there we go. Going well with triple brie cheese, says Denise. Salty enough. Yeah. The Bordelais, depending on the vintage, I wouldn't say this vintage because this is too sweet. But in less sweet vintages, they'll serve it with lobster, and indeed, or even chill it down a little more than this and just serve it as an aperitif, even with some foie gras. So if we can't have pizza, then we'll just.
I was just going to say, you're putting the pizza to shame. You're saying you're taking that pizza and raising it a couple levels. Well played, Jim. Well played. Yeah.
No.
Shall we launch the polling?
Okay, so I'm going to hand this back. Oh yes, polling. Yes, please. This is going to be a tough one because they're so different.
Yeah. And I think it just kind of comes down to truly preference. I mean, much different ones.
While we're doing that, I don't recall off the top of my head what the Marcus Molitor alcohol is, but it's probably around about 12. And some of his drier wines, they are way down. I mean, we're talking about 11 even. I looked at one the other day in our warehouse and it was 7.5. I mean, these are wines that you could happily pop a bottle or two on the patio while the weather's still nice and warm. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah, as you'd expect. Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. I mean, I think each wine has its place, and this is not intended to be a competition between these two wines. But I can clearly understand why the Molitor is probably the more appealing of the two wines on its own in this environment.
So with that, I'm going to launch
Back
a
to our master of
poll.
ceremonies.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to launch a poll for see which one it was everyone's favorite, and we'll wrap up.
Ah,
Wow. Fascinating. All right. All
Wow.
over the place. I love it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm glad you guys liked all the wines. No, that's really fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, that achieved what we're trying to do tonight, which is just show you guys some really premium wines and premium white wines, and hopefully introduce you to something that you haven't tried before. And I don't think I've had such a deep dive into Sauternes, and I haven't had one of Marcus Molitor's golden capsules before, so this is what a special evening, and I appreciate everyone joining us. And if you guys have any other questions, let me know now or forever hold your peace. We will have a recording available tomorrow, but go ahead, Simon.
You would just remind you'll send out a quick email for people who had questions about the alcohol in these wines.
Yes, we'll send a follow-up email just with the wines and the wine prices, of course, and the alcohols and all the information that's pertinent. But yeah, I'm interested in a few of these alcohols myself, so I'm very curious.
Well, we're wrapping everything up. Maybe
that's yeah.
I was going to say, aside from just questions, maybe
Steve
even
just
throw
saying all the ones
in
we
the
usually
comment box. Yeah, in the comment box, throw some ideas from we've got internally. We've got some ideas for where we're headed next, but we're always welcome to feedback and what we're looking forward to. I mean, I think we've got some nice things in the pipeline, but a lot of different directions that we can go. So by all means, throw some suggestions into the comment box that we're looking forward to tasting next. So. Silas, before we wrap up, what do you think? Just forget wine of, not necessarily your favorite wine of the night, but your most surprising wine of the night, or something that really kind of overperformed, or something that was just, just kind of hit you in a nice way tonight.
I was surprised by the Jablay. I thought, the Jablay, just for everyone's information, is a fraction of the cost of the Chave, and I thought that showed really, really well. It was when I was prepping the samples, it was very muted, and I was a little afraid to show it next to something as great as the Chave. But tonight, it was singing. It was a really nice wine.
Yeah.
So we have CDPs, which I agree with. That would be really cool to do the different, different areas of CDP. Comparing California Pinot Noirs, Napa, Sonoma, Santa Barbara, that would be really cool too. Brunello, now that's one.
Yeah,
that would be interesting. Different Brunellos. Oh, Oregon. Oh, you, Jose, stop it. And after my heart.
Jordan, for the Brunello tasting, we'll arrange for a salumi meat board to be delivered with the Brunello samples. But yeah, no, that'd be also good suggestion there by Jim as well. I think that's a cool way to show some contrast and
yeah. Well, that's great suggestions. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks again. And look out for that email tomorrow.
Thank you all for joining us this evening.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
any Chicago Wine Company dinners in the future? I think Son's face mask maybe, but that's going to be a while yet, guys.
Yeah, we
But in the
have some
pipeline,
stuff-
for sure.
We do have some stuff in the works, but
Yes.
yeah, keep an eye out for more
Yeah.
rotations like this. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thanks all.